Right, I'm not fucking about like with rambling and all that. Right, drugs. I'm sorry, there's background noise. The person lives above me is really like drunk. Um, yeah, drugs. Because a lot of people have very mixed views on drugs. Um, for example, like me personally, I've got very liberal views on it, but there are some very conservative views as well on it, such as like a lot of people believe that basically drugs are bad, drugs ruin lives. Uh, if you take drugs, therefore you're a worse person because you've taken drugs. And I'm not obviously I'm on about illegal drugs, not things like prescription drugs or caffeine, which is classed as a drug, and all that crap. So what I believe is that it's a slightly radical view, but I believe that drugs should be legalized, like completely every drug, completely legal. And there's a few reasons behind this. I mean, first off, is that it takes all the money out of organised crime. It doesn't mean that there can be people sat at the top who are earning millions and millions off of drugs, and basically they don't get caught because it's the real dealers. It's not the people that are doing it like selling eighths and all that and making a little bit here and there. I'm on about like the real big kingpins, like the ones you kind of see in movies sometimes, the ones that are proper like they deal hundreds of thousands worth of coke, and they make like a 150% net gain on it and become stupidly rich. Take money away from them because they don't deserve that fucking money. They're smart, but they don't deserve that money. Right? So money out of organised crime, reason number one. Reason number two is that drugs. A lot of people that overdose from drugs are people that are getting drugs that are actually purer than what they used to. Because most drugs, I mean, I assume I don't know a huge amount about worldwide drugs. I know quite a bit about drugs in the UK, and most people cut drugs with other things. For example, like you can mix other brick dust, um, talcum powder, rat poison, anything to stuff like coke or heroin. Things that just basically to make the weight because then you make more money off of it. And what happens to a lot of people is they become a habitual drug user, take a lot, and then end up with a deal that they get too much of the drug, if you get me. They end up getting a purer version of what they used to, and their body can't handle it, and it's the shock to the system, and it basically just wipes them out. And also, obviously, as well, there's impurities, say, like I said, rat poison that isn't particularly good to stick into your body. And then there's a third reason, which is more that less people would actually do them than you'd think. If drugs were legal, less people would be getting high. Um, I'm sorry, I'm really tired. Like saying, getting high off weed or coke or heroin or whatever. And it's weird because I mean, at first, obviously, if they legalize drugs, people would go sick, like they go fucking mental. People would just take as many drugs as they can, and it'd be chaos. And a lot of people will be there saying, "Oh, I told you, don't take drugs. Drugs are bad. Drugs ruin lives." And yeah, drugs do ruin lives at the moment, but illegal drugs are ruining lives. And yeah, less people would take them than you think because there are a huge amount of people that I know and people that I don't know, that started taking drugs or do take drugs because it's seen as rebellious and it's seen as something that you shouldn't do, therefore it makes you cooler to do it. And that's, I mean, one, it's not true because it doesn't make you cooler. It just means that basically you're putting more shit into your body without realizing what's actually in there. I mean, if you're gonna do coke, do pure coke. If you're gonna do heroin, do pure. If you're gonna smoke weed, don't have it laced with shit. Because I've had people that like say with weed, um, grind up glass and stick it into the weed because it sparkles more. People think it's got more THC. It adds to the weight, so they get more money out of that, and people are basically breathing in glass, which is not something I would recommend. So that's like my main theories on drugs anyway. Less people would do them, take money out of organised crime, and actually make us a bit of money on the side for as a country as well. I mean, the whole thing we've got a big thing. I don't know if it's anyone in America knows, but a big thing in Britain is, like, say, doing a Dutch dash, going to Amsterdam for a day, smoking loads of weed, doing drugs, and then coming back the next day, or spending a couple of days there because drugs are legal. But the amount of revenue we could get off of it is actually ridiculous. And also, so not as many people take them as you think. There'd be less deaths, there'd be less money going to organised crime, and the world would just be a better place. And it would also, it'd stop people getting bad names and put in prison for stupid things. Because I mean, people get put in. I mean, it doesn't really happen. I mean, if you smoke weed and you get caught with an eighth, chances are you get a slap on your wrist, maybe a fine, maybe a community service, or just a warning. But people can actually get locked up for possession, and to think to go to jail for a couple of years because you smoked a bit of weed, and at no point I want to say is that I'm not condoning heavy drug use in the same way that I would not condone alcoholism, because it can become a problem, and it can be an addiction, and I completely understand that. But for mild use, I mean, I've like, I'm not going to go hugely into my drug history, but I've say smoked weed before, and I mean, I know people. Well, I'm not going to name who I work or have worked with, to keep it just as vague, who could do 40 or 50-hour weeks and still smoke weed in their spare time. It's true that weed can make you less motivational and severely damage your bills by the amount of Doritos or Mountain Dew you end up buying. But it doesn't mean that it can't be done, and it doesn't mean that you can't take it moderately. People seem to think that if you have drugs, therefore you will become an addict and you'll waste your life away. And that's not entirely true, in the same way that if you drink, you can have a drink without becoming an alcoholic. It's actually, it's quite stupid, really. It's a stupid theory to think that if you smoked, say, an eighth a week, that you would become an addict. Or even if you smoke one joint once, you're going to become an addict, waste your life away, spend all your money on weed and food, obviously, because you get munchers and shit. And it's not right. It really isn't. Yes, there are addicts, but there are addicts for a lot of things. There are alcohol, people who are addicted to alcohol, who are addicted to sex, who are addicted to chocolate. These aren't seen as big a problem as being addicted to drugs. And they're all addictions, and they're all things that can be taken moderately. What I'm trying to say is that just because if drugs were legal, it doesn't mean that everyone's become a drug addict. It means that people could do drugs moderately. And that's the main point of this. And I'm going to go because this has been longer than I thought, and everyone's being proper noisy in my house. So, yeah, that's my video on drugs.